One of the things that's in this gravel in the road is available silica, because the rock is mostly silica quartz, and it's been crushed and exposed new surfaces that are sharp and erodible, and so the silica has fertilized the edge of the road. And so you see these plants like this that are growing like a lot better than you get off in there another 6 feet and whatnot, and you don't see that effect anymore. So the silica that is deficient in this soil would make a significant difference. And the gravel quarry that produced this gravel probably washes gravel.
Yeah, we could get gravel
in order
fines.
to go to the gravel, to the concrete plant, and their settling pond would be full of this dust.
Yeah, we could definitely
would make
get
the
fines.
best silica fertilizer that you could buy for a modest price.
Okay, so jump right in. How would you apply that?
To get it to spread like from a lime spreading truck, which is the scale that you need to spread it on, then it has to be dry enough. So you get it from the gravel quarry, get somebody to haul it, and stack it here, and you might have to put a tarp on it to get it to dry out enough. But when it's dry enough, then you spread it with a lime spreader.
A compost spreader wouldn't do it, would it?
Hard to say, depends on the compost spreader.
Yeah, what if you mix it with compost? Is that a good way of getting it out? Or you would need a lot more compost?
I put about 10% of my compost would be the dust from the quarry. That's what I'd do.
10% in your piles.
I'd put about 10% in the piles by volume. It's heavier, so not by weight. More by volume, because you get more in it by volume. But you can see this dust is like feeding the verge here. And
that's the best part of our field. Look at that.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, you just get over here a little further, and it turns much more pale, and it just doesn't work as well anymore.
So we're waterlogged here. We can see that, like you said, with the dock and what other plants? We could see some of the wetland plants in here, the buttercup. So to make it to where it drains better, is that how would we go about that? Would that be a biological process with the minerals, or in this case, would it help to try to rip the soil? Or both?
Both. But basically, to hold the soil open, it's going to require soil biology.
Sure.
And to feed the soil biology, or the soil food web, you call this the living web farm? That might have something to do with the soil food web.
Yeah.
And if that's so, then you want to grow the soil food web. Well, if you were going to grow anything, you'd feed it to make it grow.
Sure.
So you'd have to feed the soil food web, and the best thing to feed it would be humic acids. And on a scale like this, just to have a few tubs of earthworms and catching their drippings is not going to be enough. So you need to find a commercial source of soluble humates and give this regular applications.
Regular twice a year, 3 times a year? Because we only have really 2 windows here. When we drill, when we crimp the cover crop, we have a window to add minerals and amendments.
Well, this cover crop should, at this time, should be up here about chest high.
Yep.
Which it's not.
No, it's being out.
And so if you were going to go through it with a spray that contained soluble humates, biodynamic preparations, some boron, because you're boron deficient, and maybe some sulfur, something with sulfur in it. The sulfur tends to lock up the humates and puts sludge in the bottom of your tank. So you might have to put the sulfates as gypsum on with a spreader truck. But you could do that once or twice a year, but the humates, you need, because they have to build the soil biology. And you couldn't feed your kids once a year
No, it doesn't work very well.
and
Tried
give
it.
them a big dose, which they'd choke on, and then they'd run out.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So to feed the soil food web, you need something like a monthly dose. And it would get to where driving through there with any kind of a spray rig, you'd be driving through stuff this high
Sure.
and higher. And so you'd have to develop lanes, and you'd crush some of your vegetation doing it.
I think it'd be better to crush a couple lanes and have your whole field grow than have what we have here.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, this is a lot of effort and a lot of energy for very little yield.
No, in fact, it's probably not going forward at all.
No, I mean, we've all noticed we're going backwards here, if anything.
The types of things that are growing here are just not feeding the soil food web, which is what holds on to things like boron and sulfur. And so you go and you're boron and sulfur deficient and silica deficient, and then you lay that down and plant into it, and as it decays, you don't have anything catching it. And it washes off down the creek too. So you're not really making progress.
No, we're not making a lot of progress. You can really see it with our crops out here. Well, let's
Yeah.
just walk out and
Yeah, let's
see
go
this.
ahead on. But you can just see how the verge is being fertilized by the gravel.
yeah, and the fines are really inexpensive. I mean, I think, for a ton, it's maybe 20, 30 bucks a ton.
My local gravel pit doesn't charge anything. My gravel hauler charges me to haul it, that's all.
Oh, wow. That's a good deal.
You can see here where it's starting to perform better, that you've really got, first of all, it's higher land, so it drains better. That helps.
Yeah, a little bit higher here, and then there's a little knoll out there, so that certainly helps. But
Yeah, there seems to be a sort of an area out there where maybe it's been plowed in both directions or something, that it's sort of a ridge down the field.
Yeah, we had a pretty decent stand of cover crop here. And if you kind of look over here, you can see the residue, what's left of it. And our intention was to be no-till, to plant right into it, but that hasn't worked so well. Our cover crop density is just not there. And then with the soil biology being out, it's favoring everything else. Look at all the dock down there.
And yet you would find that the yield winners in the corn wars, if you want to call them wars, or anyway, the contests to see who can produce the most corn or soybeans or whatever per acre, the winners of those contests are doing that. They're growing their cover crops and rolling them down and planting into them in order to get the highest yields on record in agriculture. So there's nothing wrong with the method.
No, the method's fine.
The method's fine, but there's something missing.
Yeah, well, you can see. It's What I love about this field is it's great because it's such a nice, it's maybe 1,200 feet. And you can you look down the row of corn here and you could just visually, you could see what's going on.
Yeah, and you can see that down there on the end and right up here on the end, it's much better than in the middle.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you can just see it. So these are things that you have to figure out what is going on, because nature's telling you, only you just don't know what it's saying.
Yeah, we can observe, but we're not able to read it.
Well, hopefully I'll give you a bunch of clues on that. And I'm looking at your radish seed there, which is just recently sprouted, and it's made almost no growth, and yet that radish plant that came up when you sowed, no doubt, it's blooming, it's chest high.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you get enough going on like that, it catches an enormous amount of carbon. You can raise your organic matter level 0.5% in a single season. It's like, oh boy, what you can do with this method is terrific. But there's certain things like, for instance, balance. You know, just because something's good doesn't mean that more of it's better. Because more of it almost surely is out of balance. And then it gets called the moron theory. Oh, you're farming with the moron theory. So just put more on.
More on. More
Well,
on.
the yield winners, David Hula, who's over here in coastal Virginia, grew 542 bushels of shelled corn to the
Amazing.
acre last year. 542 bushels to the acre. If you compute that out in kilos per hectare, that's 40 metric tons to the hectare.
Boy, you could really feed the world like that, couldn't you?
Well, just think of how much carbon is in there. Like 46% of that is carbon. And these weren't empty bushels either. His bushels weighed 30 kilos to 66 pounds to the bushel.
Dense, nutrient
The
dense.
heaviest bushel weight I've ever heard of. And 542 bushels to the acre at the heaviest bushel weight I've ever heard of. That's like, we ought to be studying what that guy's doing.
Yeah, I'd like to know. So what's he doing? Cover crops and
He's
crimping
cut
them and-
back his nitrogen levels. He can't do that if he pours too much nitrogen on the field. Throws things out of balance. You'd think you'd know that.
Yeah.
We can't throw things out of balance. No, that doesn't work at all. So there it is. So balance is really, really, really important.
Okay. Well, let's walk out here and you could kind of see what we're up to. This is our awesome looking potato patch. We planted it. It rained for, about half a week. The lower part rotted out.
Yep.
And then we got a little mini drought. And most of this didn't pop up until after the weeds popped up. So we've been behind on, we couldn't really cultivate, we couldn't hill because we couldn't even see the potatoes. And then plenty of dock.
Yep. There's
Yep.
plenty.
Yep. And the potatoes, they don't look so hot.
No, it would help to know that potatoes are the most oxygen-dependent crop of anything we grow. They really require the oxygen, which is why they're hilled ordinarily. If you had the percolation of air in your soil, you wouldn't have to hill your potatoes.
Yeah. And you could see it. This lower section, there's no oxygen. This drains a little bit better, so I'd assume there's more oxygen. And this is growing better than down there, but still it's really sad. A lot of effort for such a little bit of yield here.
It's interesting because I have saved potato crops by putting 5 pints of concentrated out through the irrigation, of course, and hugely diluted, 5 pints of concentrated hydrogen peroxide to the
Really?
acre. To the acre. Cheap, efficient. The potatoes turn a dark green.
And
It's
what does
oxygen
do?
that gets
So it's
oxygen that gets the magnesium available.
So here you would do something like that. You would do hydrogen peroxide sprayed out.
That's one of the things I might do here. In any oxygen deficient area in my potato patch, I would do that. And sometimes it's oxygen deficiency in the whole soil, but I just thought I'd pull up a potato plant here and look at it and see what it's doing. Yeah, let's see what happened there. Oh, it's got some little babies
Couple little
there.
baby tubers on there.
Yeah. What is that one? Is that
Some kind of
a fungus or is that?
some kind of fungal growth? It looks like.
Well, right next to it, what's this potato doing? A little better.
Slightly, but not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot. Well, look at this. If I break this clod open, what will I see? And I see, that's a tunnel. Those are tunnels. Mm-hmm. This is an old root channel, and it has had tunnels along it. But by and large, the rest of the soil is pretty much sealed up.
Yeah, it's sealed up and not a whole lot of activity.
Not a whole lot of activity. And this is something that's, you've really got the carbon in this soil, but there's a limit to how much you can just put mulches and carbonaceous material on there and not throw things out of balance.
Yeah, well, we're obviously out of balance. Oh, look at that.
That's a decent enough potato. And this is a nice variety. I like this variety. What do you call that?
I don't remember what we put in first. I don't know if Rocco's here, but Rocco wrote it down. I don't
it's
think
a nice
that's
variety.
a Yukon Gold, but it could be.
Well, you might want to take that back to the house or something.
Yeah. Oh,
that's the one you planted.
The seed potato.
Yep.
Look at that.
Well, this is a clay loam soil. Mm-hmm. It's got a really good clay and a good sand content. Mm-hmm. That was too much mulch, and it didn't have enough nitrogen in it. Yep. Not enough protein.
Yep.
So it's...
Yep. The theory here was what I tried to do this with the potato patches. We were going to mulch it with the leaves because we get the leaves for free. Right. So I pushed them out and hoping to plant right into it and would eliminate a lot of our weeds. But
didn't work out.
It didn't work so hot.
No.
So.
Well, my first 8 years of farming, at least 8, I was making more mistakes than I was being successful at things.
Well, that's how you learn, right? That's so they say.
Yeah. Oh, I had a real.
You can only learn so much until you gotta feed yourself and make some money, though.
Well, that's why I was working on the oil rigs and why I built bridges down in Atlanta and all those things, because I didn't know how nature worked. I wasn't going to use poisons because it was real clear to me where that was headed. That's the death of civilization. And every civilization that was cooking and it died when its agriculture failed. Now, with the Carthaginians, the Romans, after Hannibal came down out of the Alps with those elephants, he really scared the hell out of the Romans. So when they won their battles for Carthage, then they hauled salt in and salted all the fields so they couldn't feed an empire anymore, and that was the end of Carthage.
With the salts.
Yeah, they salted their fields. That's what defeated the Carthaginians. Well, we're doing that too.
With water,
all of our water,
fertilizers.
They're salts.
Yeah.
And we're having problems in agriculture with moisture, with water. And some of our most productive agriculture is where we have had irrigation water. And as that irrigation water has dried up, then things like California's carrot crop failed and things like that.
Yeah, it evaporates and there's more salts in the surface.
Strangely enough, in our soils here in the east, where drainage is more of a problem, then the life in the soil also causes it to drain as well as holding on to the water. You know, anything that's inside the cell walls of a living organism, it can rain all it wants and it doesn't wash it away. But if it's just free in the soil, if it's just soluble and out there in the soil solution, then it washes away.
And plus,
No surprise,
it's at least
huh?
half of the soil is exposed, even though the crop is taking up some, and the rest of the soil is exposed to the elements in conventional ag.
Well, it's actively killed. If you were out there in California and you saw the way they were growing things, then they like fumigate the soil in order to kill everything. In Australia, we've got organic, biodynamic, they call them pawpaws. Papayas in Australia are called pawpaws.
Oh, that's funny.
So they're growing these papayas on plants that they have to have a scissors lift to pick them because they're 5, 6 years old. In Hawaii, the papaya growers, growing the same varieties, they get a subsidy for clearing rainforest. So they bulldoze a few acres of rainforest. Then they put a plastic film over it and fumigate the field. Then they pour the chemical fertilizer to it and plant it up in papayas, and they get a disease by the time they're less than a year old. And so they doze those off and fumigate it again and give it another planting of papayas, and it lasts a shorter period of time before it's finished, and then they abandon that field, and they're really making the money on the subsidy for wrecking the rainforest and abandoning it.
Is that why they developed the GMO papaya, do you think? Do you know about that?
No, but what? A GMO papaya that doesn't get the disease?
It's resistant to some virus. I'm not sure which.
Well, yeah, the disease that kills their papayas, no doubt. But that's a stopgap solution at the very best.
That's working way down the road instead of working on the
Well,
root of the problem.
why can we grow? They're both in the tropics.
Sure.
Why can we grow papayas that are 5 and 6 and 7 years old? That the problem that we have is we have to have a scissors lift to pick them. Why can we do that in Australia and they can't keep them alive for even a year in Hawaii?
Since we're talking about Australia, tell me about Australia. The movement, the biodynamic movement is pretty substantial there, right? Maybe,
Right.
I mean, I heard what, 1,000,000+ acres under cultivation of biodynamic farming, or maybe not cultivation, but
Yeah, most of those large acreages are cattle or cash grain. And the application of biodynamics to them is inflated by the fact that the property's that big, but not all of it is treated biodynamically.
Sure.
It's a big deal to spray that many acres biodynamically. It's way expensive. People are putting on their pastures, they're putting on biodynamic preparations with airplanes and helicopters in order to get the cost per acre down, because you're dealing with huge acreages. So it's probably overestimation to say that it's 1.5 million or however many acres.
Sure.
There's not that many acres under really intensive biodynamic management.
But do you feel like that's taken off in Australia a lot more than, say, America?
Oh yeah, definitely. Even though there's far fewer farms and farmers in Australia, and there's much less farmable land because the interior of Australia is pretty dry, most of it. And I know people with cattle stations that it's a 2-hour drive to their next door neighbor's house.
Oh, right up my alley.
Well, you wouldn't be disturbed by the racket the neighbors are making when they have a party.
Yeah, yeah.
But